In 1869, a metallic disc pursues a scientist named Morton. Morton tries to flee, aiming to alert the president about a lunatic and a giant spider. Unfortunately, the disc catches up and Morton is decapitated. General Bloodbath McGrath laughs at Morton's demise and takes the disc. In Morgan, West Virginia, Captain Jim West of the U.S. Army relaxes in a bath with his beautiful girlfriend, Belle. Their peaceful moment is cut short when McGrath's men show up. While the men load cargo, a jittery horse bumps into the water tower's leg, causing it to collapse and spill a naked Jim onto a warehouse roof. With only a hat for cover, Jim battles the intruders. After winning, Belle tosses him the rest of his clothes. At a gentleman's club, McGrath notices a woman at the bar and sees a chest being carried, clearly containing someone. Hudson invites McGrath upstairs to examine the goods, and the woman follows. A drunk man tries to negotiate a night with her, but the woman, actually a man in disguise, drops the act and knocks him out. Meanwhile, Jim fights off McGrath's men. When two aim their guns, Belle suddenly falls into Jim's arms, and the water tank traps the gunman. Jim chases and jumps onto a carriage. Opening the cargo, he finds bottles of nitroglycerin. At the club, McGrath continues selecting women until the disguised man intervenes. McGrath asks his name, and he responds with Dora. Jim halts the horses just before a cliff near the club. He climbs onto the building while Dora escorts McGrath to a private room. McGrath unfastens Dora's belt, exposing two spinning wheels that hypnotize him. Dora loses the fake voice and starts questioning the general. However, McGrath mistakenly thinks he's a dog, so he only barks in response. Frustrated as the wheels cease spinning, McGrath becomes restless. Jim smashes through the window, knocking McGrath out. When McGrath regains consciousness, he tackles Jim, pushing him into the next room. McGrath manages to flee while Jim fights to reach him. Dora stops Hudson, but Jim accidentally runs into him, allowing Hudson to escape. Dora then reveals himself to be U.S. Marshal Artemus Gordon. Outside, someone loads a chest into a carriage. The man in the carriage pulls a pin on a nitro-filled wagon, causing it to explode into the gentleman's club. A few days later, Jim meets with U.S. President Ulysses Grant, who scolds him for letting McGrath escape. Jim shifts the blame onto Gordon, but the president holds the U.S. Marshal in high esteem. Jim points his gun at the president, demanding to know his true identity, prompting Gordon to drop his act. The real President Grant arrives, and Gordon quickly sheds his disguise. The president criticizes their ineffective methods, but believes they will be more effective together. McGrath has kidnapped America's leading scientists and sent a letter to the president, demanding he surrender within a week. Jim and Gordon have different ideas on how to stop McGrath, but President Grant urges them to put aside their differences and find McGrath within the deadline. Later, Jim attempts to reach their train while riding a horse. He shouts for Gordon to halt the train, but Gordon ignores him. Eventually, Jim leaps onto the train's platform, which catapults him into the air, landing right next to Gordon. Gordon proudly reveals his latest invention, a bulletproof chain mail. Jim points a gun at it, but Gordon mentions it hasn't been tested yet. Disliking violence and weapons, Gordon's comment prompts Jim to punch him. In response, Gordon presses a button that sends Jim onto a billiard table, restrains him, and turns him to face the tracks below. Jim activates a lever, causing Gordon's chair to flip, placing him in the same situation. Upset, Gordon concedes they need to resolve their differences. The conductor, Coleman, releases them from Gordon's trap. To decide their next move, Gordon shows Morton's decapitated head and a magnetic collar found nearby. He explains that theoretically, the last image seen before death is imprinted on the retina, and he illuminates Morton's eyes. After adjusting the image, they identify McGrath with an invitation in his pocket, indicating their next stop. In New Orleans, Gordon tries to persuade Jim to dress up for the costume party, but Jim firmly refuses. Jim sneers at Gordon's outfit at the gentleman's club, and Gordon proves its legitimacy by letting him feel the fake chest. Overhearing, Coleman thinks he understands what's happening. Jim then empties the fake chest's buckwheat filler and replaces it with water. Gordon checks it and approves. Later that night, Jim stealthily enters the party, where Ms. East welcomes him. Jim inquires about McGrath, but she doesn't recognize the name. She says she works for Dr. Arliss Loveless, who is hosting the event. Jim notices a woman resembling Dora in the crowd just as Ms. East leaves. Suddenly, a statue of Abraham Lincoln on stage is blown up, revealing Loveless in a wheelchair. He bitterly lists the body parts he lost in war, but then expresses gratitude to his foreign guests. After his speech, Loveless acknowledges Jim, saying he hasn't seen McGrath in a long time. Later, Jim sneaks into Loveless' office and eavesdrops on a conversation where Loveless orders McGrath to move his men to a specific location that night. After they leave, Jim sneaks in to investigate. Meanwhile, Gordon hears a woman screaming upstairs. Jim uses a pencil to trace a map from Loveless' notepad, but gets interrupted by Ms. East. As she attempts to seduce him, a painting behind Jim conceals a gun. Noticing Ms. East's gaze shifting, Jim quickly turns and shoots the man hiding in the painting, accidentally wounding Ms. East. Jim then shoots at the other suspicious paintings before leaving the office. At the party, Jim grabs a red-headed woman and shares what he found out, jokingly tapping her chest, thinking it's Gordon in disguise. The woman gasps and slaps him, catching everyone's attention. Disguised anew, Gordon suggests that the crowd should hang Jim, and they drag him outside. When everyone is gone, Gordon sneaks into the upstairs room and discovers a woman in a cage. He rescues her, and she introduces herself as Rita. Outside, Jim tries to talk his way out of being hanged until he notices Gordon arriving with a carriage. Jim swings from the rope, realizing it's made of rubber, and uses it to launch himself onto the carriage. He immediately scolds Gordon for putting him in that situation. Gordon explains that it was a distraction, so he could look for the scientists. Rita mentions she's the daughter of scientist Guillermo Escobar. Meanwhile, McGrath and Loveless are on a metal boat on a lake. McGrath's army waits by the shore until a metal tank appears and starts firing at them, enraging McGrath. Loveless reminds McGrath that he surrendered at the Battle of New Liberty, while Loveless sacrificed himself to create their weapons. McGrath points his gun at Loveless, but Loveless shoots him with a hidden gun in his wheelchair, killing him. Loveless' assistants throw McGrath overboard, and Loveless tells his foreign guests that his invention will destroy the U.S. Army. He demands gold in exchange for his next creation, insisting the tank is just the beginning. The tank is then connected to a steel train, headed to Loveless' next target. The trio soon arrives at the lake and sees the destruction. Jim recalls the tank from survivors of the Battle of New Liberty. He fought in that war and remembers finding women and children killed by that same weapon. Hearing sounds, Jim finds McGrath, who is injured and in the lake. McGrath reveals Loveless was responsible for killing innocents during the war and his men that night. Before he can say more, McGrath dies. Rita remembers overhearing Loveless henchmen hinting about heading to Utah. Jim and Gordon take off in their train, leaving Rita behind. Jim says Rita was a distraction for him, while Gordon counters that she was actually interested in him. While Gordon is cooking and admiring Rita's looks, she suddenly drops in from the ceiling. Noticing her arrival, Gordon gets flustered and changes the subject. Jim quickly tells Rita to leave, but she insists she knows why Loveless had international guests. She explains that the foreign ministers are working with Loveless because of a failed agreement linked to the Louisiana Purchase. Rita, determined to save her father, kisses Jim to persuade him. Feeling jealous, Gordon shows off his sleeping gas bombs disguised as pool balls. The next day, as they get closer to Loveless' train, Jim notices that Gordon has made adjustments to his outfit. After coming out of a tunnel, Coleman loses track of Loveless' train. What they don't know is that Loveless' train has extended its legs to go out of sight and is now speeding behind them. Loveless shoots a cannon, narrowly missing them. Jim jumps onto the pool table and urges Gordon to sling him under the train. Gordon pulls the platform, but the rope snaps. Jim speeds underneath Loveless' train and attaches himself to it. The rope's elasticity makes him bounce around until he manages to grab onto the platform and gets on board. Jim climbs onto the train's roof, not aware that Hudson is behind him. Hudson strangles Jim, but Jim uses a new blade from his shoe to stab Hudson. Jim then pushes Hudson's body into the chimney, just as Loveless shoots a grappling hook into their train. With the chimney blocked, Loveless' train overheats and explodes. Frightened, Rita grabs one of Gordon's billiard balls and says she won't let Loveless capture her alive. Mistaking Jim for Loveless, Rita sets off the sleeping gas. Hours later, Jim and Gordon wake up in a cornfield, wearing magnetic collars. Loveless mocks them, saying Rita is with him. Holding Coleman at gunpoint, Loveless steals their train. After he leaves, Gordon finds a note in his pocket stating they will be safe if they stay within a certain area. Ignoring Gordon's warnings, Jim walks away. Suddenly, Loveless' machine activates and shoots two metal discs that chase them. Gordon realizes the discs are drawn to the magnets in their collars. They run until Jim comes up with a plan. They jump into each other's arms and fall into a gully, causing the discs to collide and explode in midair. Later, Gordon reprimands Jim for not listening and putting them in danger in the cornfield. Angry, Gordon smashes a rock onto Jim's collar, accidentally reversing its polarity and causing it to stick to his own collar. The two try to get away from each other, but the magnets pull them back together. They fall into a shallow pond where Gordon finally finds his tools. After taking off the collars, they camp in the desert. Jim shares that as a boy, he was sent to a plantation but escaped. He was then raised by natives in the desert. Hearing that Jim saw his family killed at the Battle of Liberty, Gordon promises to catch Loveless for him. The next morning, they walk to Spider Canyon. Gordon, still wearing the magnetic collar, suddenly gets pulled across the desert. This leads them to Loveless' private train track, and they find their train. They head to the canyon and see Loveless' giant mechanical spider leaving. Jim arms himself while Gordon makes a plan to stop the spider. However, Jim isn't interested in his idea and rushes him to chase Loveless. Nearby, President Grant celebrates the opening of the new railroad. But the ceremony is disrupted by the mechanical spider. The crowd runs as the spider approaches the president. It lowers its head, and Loveless demands President Grant give up the country to him. To show he's serious, Loveless fires cannons at the president's train. Behind the train, Gordon appears, disguised as another President Grant while Jim climbs onto the spider. Loveless captures both presidents. Jim reaches the spider's head, but is shot by one of Loveless' assistants. After the spider gets away, Jim wakes up, saved by Gordon's bulletproof chainmail. In Spider Canyon, Loveless celebrates his win. He promises to give back a few states to foreign colonists while taking a part of the country for himself. Loveless presents a document for President Grant to officially surrender the United States. President Grant insists that he will never give up the country. To persuade the president, Loveless summons Gordon to be executed on stage. Gordon feels secure because he's wearing bulletproof chainmail. However, Loveless shocks him by ordering a headshot. Before Loveless can act, Jim interrupts, disguised in a belly dancer outfit. While entertaining Loveless, Jim skillfully snatches the keys from Loveless' wheelchair. Jim dances over to Gordon, handing him the keys and a mini revolver, and then gives the keys to Coleman. Jim continues to distract Loveless, but accidentally activates a weapon hidden in his brassiere. The brassiere shoots fire at Loveless guards, allowing Loveless and his crew to escape with the president. Meanwhile, Rita frees her father, and Jim and Gordon devise a plan to save the president. As they watch the giant spider vehicle escaping, Jim urges Gordon to complete the flying machine he was designing. Gordon hurriedly constructs the aircraft to chase after Loveless. During the pursuit, Loveless threatens to annihilate a small town unless the president surrenders the nation. When the president stands firm, Loveless destroys all the buildings in the town. At that moment, Gordon and Jim arrive. Jim drops nitroglycerin on the spider, damaging its top. However, their aircraft's wings are shot off, causing them to crash onto the spider's head. Loveless offers them a chance to live if they pledge allegiance to him, but Jim refuses and is dropped inside the machine. Inside, Jim confronts a man with blades for hands, armed only with a blade in his shoe. His blade is quickly broken, and another enemy joins the fight. After being knocked back, Jim is attacked by a third man wielding a shovel. Valorously, Jim fights all three, throwing the man with blades off the spider, pushing another into the gears, and knocking the last one with the shovel. Suddenly, a fourth man appears, sporting a body armored with metal plates. This man grabs Jim by the neck and delivers a powerful punch to his chest. Jim fights back with a wrench until he's forced to retreat onto the ledge, where he surrenders the wrench. However, sparks begin to fly from the man's head, causing him to fall off the spider. Loveless descends into the machine to confront Jim personally, but is swiftly kicked in the chest. As Loveless struggles with his stuck wheelchair, Jim mocks him. Unexpectedly, mechanical legs extend from Loveless' wheelchair, enabling him to move. Despite Jim landing a punch on Loveless, the latter knocks him down. Gordon, seeing Jim's peril, draws his hidden gun and aims at Loveless, who remains unfazed. Summoning his courage, Gordon shoots at the mechanical leg, disabling Loveless' machine. Loveless assistants retaliate against Gordon, while Loveless loses his mechanical legs and crawls away. Spotting his gun near his wheelchair, Loveless attempts to reach it as Gordon defeats his assistants. Meanwhile, the mechanical spider inches closer to the cliff edge with no one at the controls. Loveless pleads for his life as he moves towards his wheelchair. Eventually, Loveless reaches his wheelchair and fires his weapon, but Jim turns in time, causing the bullet to strike the machine's pipes instead. This causes the spider to tilt forward over the cliff, and Loveless' wheelchair plunges down. Jim grabs onto Loveless as he falls and pulls a lever, sending them both tumbling into the abyss. Jim grabs hold of the dead body he had chained and pushed off the spider earlier, ensuring only Loveless meets his demise. Days later, Jim and Gordon attend the ceremony celebrating the new railway in Utah. The president expresses gratitude for their courage and presents them with Secret Service badges. After the president departs, Rita approaches them, revealing her intention to return home to Texas. She confesses that Guillermo Escobar is not her father but her husband, which surprises and disappoints Jim and Gordon. Despite this revelation, Jim and Gordon find solace in each other's company as they ride off into the sunset aboard Loveless' mechanical spider. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Take care.